posted an Instagram post just basically saying that my life had been really busy and I had been struggling to find the time to film and kind of beating myself up about it. I really enjoy making these videos. I enjoy putting them out there and hopefully for you to be enjoying them. And I also really enjoy it for me because I kind of get a relief while making these videos, and I really enjoy the whole process. So it feels like it's just been too long, but here we are. I'm back, and hopefully I can kind of keep a regular routine. But I have I'm not going to go into a whole big spiel about my life, but I have quite a busy job and life in general, so I am trying to keep creating these videos as a regular part of my life, because I don't want to fall back on it, but there may be times when there is going to be a little bit of a delay, and everyone was really lovely about the post that I put up, so it's a lot of the worry is just in my head, but that's part of being me. Anyway, enough of that. This is a true crime video today. It is an unsolved serial killer case. So the case I'm going to be talking to you about, before I actually start, I do just want to say, if anything relating to true crime, murder, sexual assault, anything relating to true crime at all is going to make you feel uncomfortable, please do click off the video now and hopefully come back for something a bit different that you will enjoy. So, my notes are down here. I'm going to start. I've started using an auto cue kind of thing, and I haven't quite figured out the speed, so I'm still going to be probably pulling it up and down, but hopefully that's not too distracting. So yeah, I'm going to get straight into it, and I hope you enjoy. So, the Hammersmith nude murders, also known as the Jack the Stripper murder case, is the biggest unsolved serial killer case that Britain has seen, with the number of victims and the depravity surpassing that of Jack the Ripper. The case involves the murder of 6 prostitutes in and around the Hammersmith area of London. Officially, there were 6 victims involved in this case, but prior to the first known victim, there were 2 other women found in a similar area, but due to the lack of evidence, they were not linked to this case. At the time these crimes took place, London was known as the swinging city, and it was kind of the place to be at the time if you were young and a lover of music and being expressive with art and fashion and that type of thing. Out of view of central kind of London and the place to be, there was a darker side to the city. It's with far more poverty and prostitution being quite common. I'll start by talking you through how and when the case began and how it kind of started to come to light to the police that they were dealing with the serial killer. So, on the morning of February the 2nd, 1964, the naked body of 29-year-old Hannah Telford was found in the River Thames near Hammersmith Bridge. Hannah Telford was a mother of 2, originally from Northumberland, and at the time of her death she was pregnant with her 3rd child. She was naked apart from a pair of stockings, and the police had determined that her body had gone into the water around 24 hours earlier at Duke's Meadow. Initially, Hannah's death was put down to suicide, despite her naked body and obvious head injuries. I think this was because, at the time, sex workers and prostitutes, there is a reputation that goes with that career path. And at that particular time, I think prostitutes and sex workers were kind of just seen as troublemakers, and they had done it to themselves. And that is what was pretty much put down to, that she committed suicide. Anyway, so with this one, with Hannah, they did not, the police didn't do a full investigation, and it was kind of just, it was a suicide, move along. This belief then changed a couple of months later when on the 8th of April 1964 the body of another prostitute named Irene Lockwood was found close to where Hannah's body had been discovered. Irene was originally from Nottinghamshire. She was 26 years old at the time of her death, and as with Hannah Tailford, Irene was pregnant. The two women were both around 5 foot to 5'2" in height, and this would kind of become a regular occurrence with the victims. Irene had been assaulted and strangled in a different location, and her body had been moved to the river. At this point, the newspapers had started to pick up on the news of this case and compare the crimes to that of Jack the Ripper. The police started an investigation to find the killer, but they continued to get no leads on who could be committing these murders. 2 weeks later, on the 24th of April 1964, the police picked up on their investigation after a third body was discovered. This time the body was not found in the river but in a quiet alleyway, which was only a couple of miles away from where the other two bodies were found. The victim was 22-year-old Helen Bartholomew from East Lothian in Scotland. As Helen's body was not found in the water, it provided the police with a lot more clues than they were able to get from the previous two victims. The post-mortem of Helen found that she had been strangled. It's believed that this may have happened during sex, as it was discovered that she had swallowed semen at the time of her death. 3 of Helen's front teeth had also been removed. Much like the other two victims, Helen, who was also known as Teddy, was around 5 foot, so short in stature. During further investigation of the body, the forensics team discovered what they believed at the time to be a vital clue. They found specks of paint on Teddy's skin. The paint was that was used on cars. The police believed that this may have come from the killer's place of work, and they began to focus on local businesses in the area that could have been carrying out this type of work and held this particular brand of paint. Their belief was that the killer may have been keeping the women's bodies where he worked before then dumping them. On the 14th of July 1964, another body was discovered. It was that of another Scottish native, 30-year-old Mary Fleming. Mary, like Helen, was found in an alleyway within a short distance from where the other bodies were found. Similar to the other victims, Mary was short in stature, and her front teeth had been removed. Also, like Helen, it was noted during the post-mortem that Mary may have been killed during sex, as she had swallowed semen before her death. Neighbours in the street where Mary's body was found had stated that just before Mary's body was discovered, they had heard a car reversing up the street. After the discovery of Mary's body, the police started to look back on older murder cases where the circumstances were similar. 2 of these murders were that of Elizabeth Figg in 1959 and Gwyneth Rees in 1963. Both of these women had been prostitutes and their bodies were found in a similar area. So these are the 2 that are very possibly were murdered by the same person that carried out these murders. A few months later, on the 25th of November 1964, the body of Frances Brown upmarket call girl and not a street worker. Margaret was last seen alive on the 23rd of October by a colleague, which solidified the police's belief that the women were being held before their bodies were dumped. As well as this, like the previous two victims, Margaret's body had the same specks of paint, which were possibly from a paint gun. The year prior to her death, Margaret had testified at the trial of Stephen Ward at the time of the Profumo affair. The whole affair came to light, leading to the end of British politician John Profumo's career. That's a kind of a side note. At this time and in between these murders, the police investigation was still ongoing. They had been sending out undercover male and female officers for months to try and find more information on possible suspects. They had been questioning motorists who they had noticed travelling through the same areas, and they were still coming up with no leads. They actually, some of the female undercover officers, I think, kind of put themselves in a position where they could have been picked up by the person, but the male officers were nearby. So, the sixth and final victim in this case was a lady named Bridget or Bridie O'Hara. Bridie was around 27 years old and had moved to London from Dublin to earn money as a sex worker. Bridie's body was discovered nearly a year after the first victim on the 16th of February 1965 by a man who was on his way to work at Erin Trading Estate in Acton. She had been left near a storage shed, and like the previous victims, her body had the same specks of paint. Unlike the other victims, Bridie's body actually appeared to be mummified. She had disappeared on the 11th of January, so it was determined that she had been held somewhere that was hot, as well as having access to the industrial paint. During the police investigation, they were able to match the paint from the bodies exactly to the paint discovered at a transformer in the Herring Trading Estate. This was very nearby to where Bridie's body was found. The estate was directly opposite to a paint spraying shop, and after this discovery, the lead investigator, Chief Superintendent John DeRose, held a press conference where he falsely put out information that they had narrowed down the suspects to 20 men. He then went on to have another press conference later on, stating that this was then reduced to 10 men. His plan was to put this out to whoever was committing these murders so that they would kind of think that the police were closing in on them. His plan somewhat worked. It's believed to have worked because there were no more murders after that. One of the theories around this case was to do with the Profumo affair. Both Frances Brown and Hannah Telford had some involvement in the trial surrounding this affair. It was also discovered that some of the victims were part of an underground party scene at the time, which involved being part of pornographic movies. So one of the earlier theories was that never really went anywhere was that the victims knew each other from this connection, and they were also connected to the murderer through this. There were a number of different suspects who have been looked into throughout this police investigation, so I'm going to detail each of them separately. The first possible subject the first possible suspect came about only a few days after Helen Bartholomew's body was found. A middle-aged caretaker named Kenneth Archibald turned himself in at Notting Hill Police Station, claiming that he had killed the second victim, Irene Lockwood. Archibald stood trial for this murder in June 1964, but pleaded not guilty, claiming that he had been drunk when he he confessed, and he did not commit the murder. Other than his confession, there was no other evidence linking Archibald to Irene's death, so on the 23rd of June 1964, he was acquitted and went free. In 1970, during a BBC television interview, Chief Superintendent Rose identified a man named Mungo Island as a possible suspect using the codename Big John. Ireland was married, in his 40s, and a security guard at the industrial estate where Brady O'Hara's body was found. Not long after he had been identified as a suspect, Ireland committed suicide. He left a note for his wife claiming, "I can't stick it any longer, and to save you and the police looking for me, I'll be in the garage." Although he was a strong suspect for the murders, and it seemed that the murders had stopped after his death, it was later discovered that Ireland had actually been in Scotland at the time of Brady O'Hara's death. Another suspect in the murders was an acquaintance of the Grey twins and their gangland associates. His name was Freddie Mills, and at the time he was a light heavyweight boxing champion. In 2001, Jimmy Tippett Jr., a reformed gangster, while writing a book, had uncovered information which suggested that Freddie Mills was the murderer. It became apparent that a number of the gangsters of the time had suspected Freddie. It was also common talk around West London that Freddie had killed the nude prostitutes. In July 1965, Freddie Mills was found dead in his car with a gunshot wound. This was put down to suicide, but it's believed that this may have been a hired hit by Freddie himself. The timing could also be why the killings had stopped. The timing is... DeRose was questioned on this and confirmed that Freddie Mills was never a suspect in the case. It is coincidental that he died in 1965 and the murders stopped in 1965, but this next one is even more interesting. Is it the next one? No, the one after that. You'll see why. So, another suspect was a police officer in the Met. He had previously been a detective but had been arrested and put in prison for committing burglaries. Apparently these burglaries he had done in order to give his colleagues work. One of the things I read was that it was kind of like a humiliation tactic, to humiliate his colleagues, that they were following leads on these burglaries that were a hoax, basically. Anyway, the detective, he didn't get on well with his colleagues, and whenever he was committing the burglaries, it was for the purpose of humiliating them. Once he was out of prison, the police started to investigate him as a suspect for the murders. After their investigation, they realised that there was no evidence against him. He was just a strange character. So, this next one is interesting, and I think I'm going to do a full video about him another time. So, Harold Jones was a man who, at the time of the murders, was living in Hammersmith, just streets away from two of the victims and in very, very close proximity to where the bodies were found. Jones was born in Monmouthshire, I'm not sure, in Wales in January 1906. He was the oldest of four, and Jones and his family lived in poverty. As a child, Jones professional boxer and was a regular attender at church where he played the organ. At around 14 years of age, Jones left school and began to work in a local oil merchant in order to provide for his family. On the 1st of November 1921, Harold Jones went on trial for the murder of 11-year-old Florence Little. Only a few months earlier, he had been acquitted of the murder and rape of an 8-year-old child called Frida Blundell. After a 1-hour-long trial, Jones was ordered to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. This was due to his age. He was only 15 when he committed these murders. Therefore, he couldn't be tried as an adult. After the trial, Harold Jones wrote a statement admitting to committing the murders. It's terrifying how brutal these murders are, and that he was 15 years old whenever he committed them. But I'll briefly detail why he's linked to this, possibly linked to this case, but I am going to do a separate video on Harold Jones because the whole case is insane. Jones was released from prison on the 6th of December 1941 at the age of 35. This was against the advice of the psychiatrist or psychologist, as during his time in prison, Jones had admitted to the psychologist that he had a desire to murder. He also admitted that he didn't want to be cured of this desire to murder. When he was released from prison, Jones was given a new name and enrolled in the Royal Navy in the hope that it would give him some sort of structure. After serving his time in the Royal Navy, Jones relocated to London under the name Harry Stevens. He then went on to marry a woman who was the daughter of a police officer, and the two went on to have a daughter of their own. Harold Jones died in 1971 of bone cancer. During the police investigation into the Hammersmith nude murders, Harold Jones was never looked into as a suspect, and because no one was aware of his past, not even his family. And I'm not sure what name he lived under whenever he was in London, if it was Harold Jones or Harry Stevens or a mixture of the two. He has had multiple different aliases. But my guess would be that his name wouldn't have flagged up because his name wasn't the same as it was whenever he was convicted. So, at the time of the murders, Jones lived in Hammersmith, only a couple of streets away from Bridget O'Hara, and he worked on the Heron trading estate where her body was found. The murders were quite similar to the murders that he'd committed in Wales. It was a similar motivation. An author called Neil Milkins had written a book called Who Was Jack the Stripper? He actually believed that Jones was the murderer, and on looking into Jones's whereabouts after his release from prison, Milkins found that the years that the killings occurred were the only years that Jones's location could not be verified. Unfortunately, this case remains officially unsolved, so there's been speculation for years as to who it could be. This one, the Harold Jones kind of theory, is the most prominent at the moment. There was quite recently another documentary, I can't remember the name of, I think it's like a criminal psychologist or something. I'm not 100% sure what he does for a living, but the documentary was held by this guy, and he's really looking into this Harold Jones theory and why he could possibly have been the one to commit these murders. But as of now, this case is still unsolved. Yeah, it's crazy. And hopefully overlooked because they're prostitutes, because they're sex workers, because they live in poverty. They're not as important. And that's just such a sad way, I think, to look at things. And I don't think we live like that as much now, but back then, those women they were troublemakers, basically. So it's just very sad. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed listening to this case, and I hope that you were able to relax whilst doing so. Thank you so much for all of the support, and thank you for 300 subscribers. I